The radar aboard USS Princeton lit up with something no sailor ever expects, an ominous, silvery shadow speeding across the South China Sea. This was not a merchant ship gliding by, it was a Type-052D Chinese destroyer, accelerating toward the American warship in a move that felt like the overt command. Stop now, or face the consequences. Suddenly, what seemed like a routine patrol turned into a high-stakes chess match on open water. In that heartbeat, the screen revealed more than metal and waves, it exposed an unspoken dare. Was this China testing American resolve? Or was the world on the brink of a confrontation none of us saw coming? The tension wasn't manufactured, it was very real, and it was caught on camera by the most powerful navy on the planet. That morning, without firing a shot, the U.S. Navy crew held their ground and turned a potential spark into a lesson in dominance. What exactly unfolded next? And what secrets lie beneath that moment of electric suspense? Stick around, because what comes next isn't just military maneuvering. It's a story of hidden vulnerabilities, silent power, and a showdown that few noticed until it nearly became history. Let me know, what would you do if you were on that bridge, watching a warship speed at you out of nowhere? In the vast expanse of the South China Sea, a staggering $3.4 trillion worth of global trade sales passed every year, a lifeline for economies across Asia, Europe, and beyond. It's not just cargo on the waves, it's the pulse of global prosperity, flowing through an arena where even a flicker of tension can send shockwaves through markets and supply chains. Enter the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group, including the USS Princeton and its escorts, steaming into these waters not as an invasion force, but as silent guardians of what the U.S. calls freedom of navigation. These aren't routine joyrides. They are deliberate patrols that assert the right to move freely, challenging any effort to claim more than international law allows. At stake is a clash of wills. On one side, Beijing seeks to turn these shared oceans into its own domain, a maritime backyard, molded by the so-called Nine-Dash Line and fortified with artificial islands and weaponry. On the other, Washington views the sea as a global commons vital for commerce, stability, and the rules-based order that underpins it all. And so, they meet not with fanfare, but with tension simmering beneath each radar ping. Dawn broke over the South China Sea, but aboard the USS Princeton, the new day began with a jolt. Radar screens flickered, and officers leaned in as they locked onto something unexpected. A Type-052D Chinese destroyer powering up and heading straight toward them. This was no tourist ship. It was a warship closing in at speed, crossing into engagement range with terrifying boldness. That destroyer wasn't unarmed. It carried the YJ-18 anti-ship cruise missile, a supersonic threat believed to reach up to 540 kilometers in range and hefty enough to cripple a warship. In contrast, the Princeton's arsenal included SM-6 missiles, designed for over-the-horizon defense, with real-world range estimates ranging from 240 kilometers officially to as much as 370 to 460 kilometers, in some assessments giving it a significant edge. Alongside, the tried-and-true SM-2 offered layered defense closer in, with a range of around 90 nautical miles, 166 kilometers. Suddenly, the silent ocean held a balance of destructive power, and lives hung in the balance. The tension couldn't have been more palpable. One wrong command, and the surrounding waters could erupt in missiles, shrapnel, and fire. Yet, remarkably, the captain of the Princeton held steady. No alarms blared. No weapons were launched. It was as though he was willing to let the Chinese destroyer come closer, just to gauge how far Beijing would go. In that silent standoff, the U.S. displayed unflinching restraint. like a predator poised to strike, but waiting for the exact moment. Why hold fire when danger looms so close? Why trust that calm when missiles could fly any second? Perhaps the answer lies in what the U.S. held back the full capabilities of a wider networked defense data sharing systems and mastery of layered engagement that China hadn't fully penetrated or even noticed. Because in naval warfare, sometimes the most powerful move is not firing a shot, but holding your fire and letting your adversary wonder what hidden strength you possess. In that charged moment under the rising sun, the Americans revealed their secret weapon: quiet confidence. What did they really know? And what was that quiet calm hiding? Stay with us. There's much more lurking beneath that electric standoff. The peaceful hum of engines and radar chatter aboard the USS Nimitz Strike Group masked an unsettling reality. Suddenly, the air and sea were alive with activity. High overhead, the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, America's airborne eye in the sky, picked up a flurry of activity from a Chinese carrier. Jets were launching, and not gentle ones, they were J-15 fighters roaring into the sky, taking off from the Liaoning or Shandong carriers. This wasn't routine. It was escalation. Simultaneously, beneath the waves, sonar operators aboard the Princeton detected something unexpected: a Type-039 submarine making so much noise that it was practically flinging its acoustic signature at them. For a vessel meant to be silent and unseen, this was a monumental blunder. What was Beijing trying to prove with this three-pronged setup: fighters in the air, destroyers on the surface, and subs below? It looked like an artist carefully setting up a dramatic painting, a naval encirclement of layered force. Yet instead of awe, what came through was fragility. The J-15S, especially the upgraded J-15T, are solid warplanes, but they're burdened by compromises: limited internal fuel and payload due to ski jump launches, meaning they climb with less armor and fewer weapons aboard. Meanwhile, the submarine was meant to be stealth incarnate, but instead, it sounded like a freight train beneath the waves. This mismatch of performance and intent exposed more than strength. It revealed the mask. This was no silent showcase of force, it was a fragile tableau. The outward appearance of a three-layered threat dissolved beneath scrutiny. How much of this was bluff? How much was posturing? The flaws in that performance echoed across radar screens and sonobuoy arrays alike. It's one thing to move assets into position, it's another to have them perform convincingly. In warfare, perception can be as potent as firepower. Here, what should have inspired fear only highlighted weaknesses visible in that moment, but easily ignored at a distance. Was China deliberately testing its assets in a grand display, or had it miscalculated, exposing its own vulnerabilities in the process? The real drama wasn't in their deployment, but in what unraveled when all three domains, air, surface, and subsurface, didn't behave like polished instruments of intimidation. In that three-dimensional dance, the question emerges: was this a show of might, or merely a theatrical illusion? And if it was the latter, who saw beyond the curtain, and how did they prepare to respond? The morning sun hadn't yet warmed the deck when the U.S. Navy made its move, and it was no ordinary response. From USS Nimitz, FA-18EF Super Hornets launched with mechanical precision. One jet catapulted into the sky every 45 seconds, like a relentless countdown of power. The Chinese carriers didn't have a reply to that speed or the control behind it. The U.S. show of force was both breathtaking and subtle. In the sky above, the Super Hornets weren't just fast, they were smart. They carried the ANAPG-79 AESA radar, a system that sweeps the airspace not with clunky mechanical motion, but with electronic beams that fluently pan, track, and target countless threats at once. This radar wasn't just radar, It was a digital hawk that could spot and follow targets faster and more reliably than the mechanically steered radars aboard the J-15s. The benefit wasn't theoretical, it worked in real time. Below, the electronic warfare wing did its magic. EA-18G Growlers, jamming variants of the Super Hornet, ventured into the electromagnetic battlefield, unleashing a deceptive matrix of signals. On Chinese screens, what once looked like 4 Super Hornets suddenly swelled into a dozen, shifting visages that baffled radar operators. Blips locked and then disappeared, locks flickered and vanished. The Growlers didn't just interfere, they rewrote perception. Imagine it this way. It's like playing an online multiplayer game with lag. Your opponent's moves are delayed, unpredictable, and lost in a blur as your connections stretch steady and full speed. The US fighters operated as if on fiber optic clarity, while Chinese radar signals lagged behind, delayed and distorted. The result? Confusion, indecision, and lost control. What looked, at first glance, like a fierce dogfight was actually more subtle, a stage show of precision and deception. The Chinese might have believed they were orchestrating a grand performance of layered force. In reality, their assets revealed themselves as vulnerable, predictable, and outpaced by smarter systems. The twist lay not in fire exchanged, but in illusions broken. China attempted a layered threat air above, sea in front, but the layers unraveled under scrutiny. It wasn't the prowess of their jets or radar that made the statement. It was how the US undermined their performance with technique. The spectacle wasn't about destruction, it was about dominance through perception, technology, and discipline. In that aerial ballet, the unanswered question hovered: had China seriously misjudged the performance, exposing their weaknesses under the guise of strength? And as the Super Hornets soared and the Growlers jammed, the real victory was not counted in missiles fired or shots taken, but in control seized without a shot. Just when the drama seemed confined to waves and skies, the tension slipped beneath the surface. China deployed its ace underwater, a Type-039 diesel-electric submarine, also known as the Song class, the first indigenously built diesel-electric submarine by the People's Liberation Army, designed for stealth in littoral waters. But the moment it raised its snorkel to recharge, it was detected instantly. The sonar systems aboard the USS Princeton didn't just hear it, they identified its acoustic fingerprint. In simple terms, every submarine emits a unique sound, a signature of its engines, hull, and even the way water flows across it. Once cataloged, any repeat performance becomes easy to catch. If things had turned kinetic, that submarine would have had mere 12 seconds, maybe less, to reconsider its choices before a torpedo from the Princeton could make it a graveyard at sea. That's not speculation. That's the reality of modern anti-submarine warfare. Yet, the biggest surprise wasn't that China showed its hand, it was that America had another card hidden. A Virginia-class nuclear submarine, silent and shadowy, had slunk behind the Chinese task force for 8 days, unseen. Then, without a warning, it surfaced calm and menacing, right within sight of the stunned Chinese crews. Imagine being in command, believing your formation is secure, coordinated across air, surface, and subsurface, only to find a silent predator you never noticed lying in wait. That kind of psychological shock isn't just powerful, it's paralyzing. How do you even respond when the unseen threat suddenly reveals itself? What does that do to the confidence of those above? And more importantly, what truths remain hidden in ocean depths, waiting for their moment to surface? Stay tuned, because beneath the waves, real secrets lie waiting. The horizon above the South China Sea rippled with movement as the USS Nimitz, commanding the Carrier Strike Group, initiated what could only be called a spectacle. From her deck, 48 FA-18 fighter jets roared into the sky, an orchestration of power that unfolded like a staged ballet of dominance. These airplanes weren't there to fire. Their purpose was projection. It was a display not of destruction, but of undeniable supremacy. Observers on nearby Chinese ships would have seen silhouettes multiply across their radar scopes, lights flaring skyward in a cadence no competitor could replicate. This wasn't combat, it was command. Yet speed and numbers weren't the only tools on show. A squadron of EA-18G Growlers, the U.S. Navy's electronic warfare specialists, took to the sky to reconfigure the electromagnetic environment. Their role was not to hit targets, but to confuse, conceal, and manipulate. With jamming pods that broadcast deceptive echoes and noise, Chinese radar screens turned into chaos planes, elongated, flipped, and vanished. What once looked like a few jets suddenly marched into dozens. Like seeing an army where only a squadron stood, radar operators were caught in a digital hall of mirrors. Their systems screamed and locked, then unlocked. It was disorientation, wrapped in technical mastery. Think about lag in an online game, your connection abrupt, jittery, action delayed. You're watching the fight, but your opponent sees it delayed. That intangible advantage isn't visible, but it's devastating. The U.S. fighters moved with clarity and control data flowing unbroken, commands crisp, radar unjammed. Meanwhile, Chinese responses lagged, outpaced, misinformed. In the skies, American pilots engaged in brief mock dogfights, locking onto Chinese J-15 fighters via radar targeting, but deliberately not firing. It was restraint that spoke volumes, discipline that shone brighter than bullets ever could. This composed restraint under pressure was more telling than any flare or missile. However, the show wasn't limited to air superiority. In a move designed to fracture their composure, a Virginia-class nuclear submarine emerged from the depths. For 8 days, it had followed the Chinese formation silently and unseen. Then, in a chilling moment, barely 90 seconds after surfacing, it slipped back beneath the waves. That brief appearance was a statement as loud as any bomb. It declared undersea supremacy without firing a shot. As the spectacle ended, the stress showed. Chinese fighters, low on fuel from pushing limits, disengaged and turned back to their carrier. Their destroyer, radios buzzing, stealth systems still scrambling, shut down its targeting systems and retreated. The triple-layered threat they had orchestrated, air, surface, and subsurface, had collapsed, not through force, but through marvel. In those minutes, the narrative shifted. It wasn't a clash of missiles, it was a demonstration of integrated superiority, coordination, and psychological command. What looked like a show of power wasn't about what exploded or cracked, it was about what stayed silent. Discipline, precision, and the unseen advantage of systems working seamlessly together. When China realized they hadn't been outgunned in a firefight, they began to understand that they had been outmaneuvered in mind space and mastery. The real message echoed not through warheads, but through control, clarity, and the kind of presence that doesn't demand violence to command respect. By the time the sun dipped lower over the South China Sea, the story was no longer about missiles, radars, or maneuvers. It was about what wasn't fired. China had come to intimidate, to flex layered power with destroyers, fighters, and submarines, but in the process revealed its own limits. Their jets burned fuel too quickly. Their radars buckled under electronic pressure. Their submarines betrayed themselves with noise, and their commanders hesitated at every turn. What was meant to be a demonstration of control became a mirror, reflecting vulnerabilities the U.S. Navy cataloged in silence. The Americans, on the other hand, didn't need to pull a trigger. With Super Hornets filling the sky, Growlers bending the electronic spectrum, and a Virginia-class submarine surfacing like a phantom before vanishing again, the message was unmistakable. Control of the sea isn't about who shouts loudest, it's about who can dominate without speaking at all. This was victory in the psychological domain, where restraint proved more powerful than fire. Yet the larger question lingers. Was this simply a show of strength to remind Beijing of its place, or a signal of the clashes still to come if ambition collides with reality? In a world where trade routes carry trillions and great powers test each other's nerves, one incident can echo louder than any battle. So what do you think if you were the Chinese commander staring at American jets above and submarines below? How would you respond? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Military Power, where the secrets of modern warfare are brought into the light.